Flight 447 goes completely silent at 38,000 feet, no radio, no instruments, no communication. Pilots fly blind, unable to navigate. Passengers panic. Then a quiet 15-year-old girl who hasn't spoken all flight stands up, walks to the cockpit, and reveals she knows exactly how to save them all. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The cabin hums with the familiar drone of engines as Flight 447 cuts through the afternoon sky at 38,000 feet. Passengers settle into their routines, some reading, others watching seatback entertainment, a few attempting sleep. In seat 14F, near the window in the center section of the Boeing 737, sits Maya Chen, 15 years old, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing an oversized gray hoodie and jeans. Her eyes remain fixed on her phone screen, earbuds firmly in place, creating an impenetrable bubble around herself. She hasn't spoken a single word since boarding 45 minutes ago at Denver International. The flight attendant, Jessica, moves down the aisle with the beverage cart. "Anything to drink, sweetie?" she asks Maya, raising her voice slightly. Maya glances up briefly, shakes her head once, then returns her attention to the phone without making eye contact. Jessica's smile doesn't falter. She's seen countless teenagers exactly like this, wanting nothing more than to be left alone. The businessman in 14E glances at Maya with mild irritation, having given up on conversation 20 minutes earlier after receiving nothing but silence. Maya stares at her phone, but she isn't scrolling through social media. Her screen displays a detailed diagram of a Boeing 737 electrical system, part of a comprehensive aviation manual she's been studying obsessively for the past 3 years. In her other hand, barely visible beneath her hoodie sleeve, she fidgets with a small metal pin, her father's pilot wings, the ones he wore during his 15 years flying for the Air Force. He died 18 months ago when his private Cessna experienced engine failure, and Maya had been with him, watching helplessly from the right seat. She survived with minor injuries. He didn't. Since that day, she's barely spoken to anyone, channeling all her grief into understanding everything about aviation, determined that she would never again be helpless in a cockpit. Her father had started teaching her to fly when she was 12, taking her up every weekend, letting her handle the controls while he guided her through basic maneuvers. He taught her how to read instruments, how to feel the aircraft through subtle changes in engine sound, how to maintain situational awareness even when systems failed. After his death, Maya couldn't stop. She spent every available hour in flight simulators and memorized emergency procedures for aircraft she'd never flown. At 15, she had more theoretical knowledge than many newly certified pilots, though she couldn't legally fly solo for another year. Nobody at her high school knew any of this. Nobody on this flight knew any of this. She was just another quiet teenager who wanted to be left alone. The first sign of trouble comes without warning. In the cockpit, Captain Robert Mitchell, 53, with 28 years of commercial aviation experience, reaches for his coffee when the overhead panel suddenly goes dark. Not flickering, completely dark. Every screen in the cockpit turns black. The primary flight displays, navigation displays, engine instruments, all vanish into darkness. The autopilot disconnects with a gentle bump that both pilots feel. First Officer David Torres immediately reaches for the radio. "Denver Center, Flight 447, we're experiencing electrical, but the radio is dead. No static, no carrier wave, nothing. The transponder that broadcasts their position has stopped transmitting." Mitchell's hands move automatically through emergency procedures, but nothing responds. He flips battery switches, tries to reset circuit breakers, attempts to activate standby power, but every action produces the same result, nothing. Torres checks the circuit breakers overhead, but none are popped. It's as if the entire electrical system has simply ceased to exist. The standby magnetic compass still works, it's mechanical, and through the windscreen they can see they're heading roughly northwest, but that's primitive navigation for an aircraft designed to fly with precision electronic guidance. In the cabin, passengers initially don't notice anything wrong. The engines continue their steady roar, the aircraft remains stable. But within 60 seconds, the more observant travelers begin to sense something amiss. The seatback entertainment screens have all gone black. The cabin intercom remains silent, no announcements from the cockpit. Jessica picks up the handset near her station, presses the button for the cockpit, and hears only silence. A cold spike of fear runs through her. In her 8 years of flying, she's never seen a complete communication failure like this. Maya notices immediately. She sees the subtle shift in the aircraft's behavior, the way it continues in a perfectly straight line rather than making the small adjustments that autopilot constantly performs. She notices her phone has lost its Wi-Fi connection. Most tellingly, she observes the body language of the flight attendants. Jessica and her colleague Mark are standing together near the forward galley, speaking in urgent low tones, repeatedly trying the interphone, their professional masks slipping. Other passengers are starting to notice too. The businessman mutters something about these damn screens never working, while a woman across the aisle asks her husband what's happening. In the cockpit, the situation deteriorates. Mitchell has taken manual control, gripping the yoke with both hands, but without instruments. He's flying entirely by feel and visual reference. At 38,000 feet, there are limited visual references. He can see the horizon and use that to keep the wings level, but he has no precise way to know their airspeed, altitude, rate of descent, fuel remaining, or dozens of other critical parameters. Torres works through every emergency checklist he can remember, but none cover a scenario where every electrical system fails simultaneously. "We need to descend," Mitchell says, his voice strained. "We can't navigate at this altitude without instruments. We need to get down where we can see landmarks, find an airport visually." Torres nods, but both men know the danger. Descending without instruments means descending without knowing their exact rate, without altitude alerts, without terrain awareness, and without the ability to tell air traffic control what they're doing. Other aircraft could be at lower altitudes, and without their transponder, those aircraft won't know Flight 447 is descending into their airspace. Mitchell begins a gentle descent, using the pressure change in his ears and the visual angle of the horizon to estimate his rate. He aims for approximately 500 feet per minute, but it's guesswork refined by experience rather than precision flying. The passengers now know something is very wrong. The descent is noticeable. A forward pitch, a slight sensation of lightness. People look around anxiously, waiting for an announcement that doesn't come. Someone calls for a flight attendant, and Jessica moves down the aisle with a practiced calm she doesn't feel. "Is everything all right? Why are we descending?" Jessica has no good answers. "I'm sure everything is fine. The captain is probably just adjusting our route." But her eyes betray her words. Maya continues watching, her mind racing through possibilities. Total electrical failure in a modern aircraft is virtually impossible, the redundancy system should prevent it. She thinks about scenarios her father discussed: electromagnetic pulse events, catastrophic lightning strikes, cascade failures. Her hands grip the armrests as she calculates their situation. Without communication, air traffic control doesn't know they're descending. Without a transponder, radar shows them only as an unidentified blip. Other aircraft won't receive collision warnings. They're essentially invisible, a ghost plane descending through controlled airspace. The businessman beside her suddenly speaks to the cabin at large: "If something's wrong with this plane, the airline is going to hear about it." His bravado masks fear. Behind them, a child starts crying. Maya remains silent, her jaw clenched, her mind working through procedures. She knows that without GPS, without navigation aids, the pilots are limited to visual identification of terrain features. She knows the greatest danger isn't the electrical failure itself but the navigation challenge it creates. As they descend through 20,000 feet, Mitchell faces a new problem. Without instruments, he can't precisely monitor cabin pressure. He continues his descent, trying to maintain a rate that won't cause excessive discomfort, but passengers are shifting in their seats, some yawning to equalize ear pressure, others looking increasingly alarmed. Maya watches Jessica move toward the forward galley again, sees her speak urgently with Mark, and then sees Jessica do something that confirms how serious this is. She manually unlocks the cockpit door. Jessica opens the door, disappears inside, and returns moments later with her professional composure completely shattered. Her face is pale, and she immediately begins preparing the cabin for an emergency landing, checking that bags are stowed, seat backs upright, tray tables secured. She doesn't explain why. She can't without the PA system. But her actions speak volumes. This is when Maya makes her decision. She unbuckles and stands, ignoring the businessman's surprised look. She walks forward with purpose. Jessica sees her approaching and holds up a hand. "Sweetie, you need to return to your seat and buckle up. We're experiencing some technical difficulties." Maya looks directly at Jessica, and when she speaks, her voice is quiet but absolutely clear, cutting through the cabin noise. "I need to speak to the captain. Now." Jessica blinks, taken aback. "That's not possible. Please return to your seat." Maya doesn't move. "My name is Maya Chen. My father was Lieutenant Colonel James Chen, Air Force pilot. He taught me to fly. I've spent 3 years studying commercial aircraft systems and emergency procedures. I know that you've lost all electrical power and all communication. I know the pilots are flying manually without instruments and probably can't navigate to a specific airport. I can help." Jessica stares at this teenager making impossible claims. But something in Maya's eyes, an intensity, a knowledge that doesn't match her age, makes her hesitate. Mark steps forward. "Jessica, if she knows anything about flying, we need to listen." Jessica makes a decision that could end her career or save lives. "Come with me." Inside the cockpit, Mitchell and Torres are descending through 15,000 feet. The landscape below is becoming clearer, a city, likely Seattle, and the characteristic shape of Puget Sound, but identifying the airport remains challenging. The door opens, and Jessica enters with Maya behind her. "Captain, this is Maya Chen. She says she has aviation training and might be able to help." Both pilots turn, and Mitchell's first reaction is visible incredulity. "A teenage girl, in his cockpit?" "Ma'am, this is highly irregular," he starts, but Maya interrupts. "Captain, you're experiencing complete electrical failure. Primary and secondary displays are dark. Navigation systems offline, radio and transponder non-functional. You're manually flying at approximately 14,000 feet, descending at 500 feet per minute, heading northwest towards Seattle, but you can't pinpoint your position for an approach." Mitchell's mouth closes. Everything she said is correct. Torres looks between the girl and his captain, stunned. Maya continues, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I can navigate using visual pilotage and dead reckoning. My father taught me old-school navigation before GPS. If you can get me a sectional chart, I can identify our position using terrain features and get us to the nearest suitable airport." Mitchell should refuse. Every regulation says he should send this girl back to her seat. But he's out of his depth. Modern commercial pilots are skilled at managing complex systems, but visual navigation without instruments is a dying art. "Torres, get the chart from the flight bag," he orders. Maya takes the chart and moves to the jump seat, spreading the sectional across her lap. She looks out the windscreen, studies the terrain, and references the chart with rapid, methodical movements. That mountain range to the east is the Cascades. The body of water to the west is Puget Sound. That city below is Seattle, and I can see Lake Washington to the east. We're currently approximately 15 miles northeast of Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, probably near Bellevue or Kirkland. Mitchell looks down and realizes she's right. The terrain matches. Torres can hardly believe it. "How do you know all this?" Maya doesn't look up. "My father and I flew this area dozens of times. I know every landmark within 200 miles of Seattle. Mitchell feels hope tempered by reality. Okay, so you can tell us where we are. But landing at Seattle-Tacoma without instruments, without communication, other aircraft could be taking off or landing. Maya nods. Seattle-Tacoma is too risky. But there's an alternative, Boeing Field, King County International, about 3 miles south of downtown. Smaller field, but the runways are long enough for a 737. Less traffic than Seattle-Tacoma. If we approach from the north and descend along the east side of Elliott Bay, we can avoid most traffic patterns. Mitchell exchanges looks with Torres. Boeing Field. It's a good option, one they should have thought of themselves. Talk me through it, Mitchell says, and Maya begins giving directions with precision that belies her age. Maintain heading 320. Descend to 5,000 feet. Watch for downtown Seattle ahead, you'll see the Space Needle. When downtown is directly ahead, turn left to heading 280. That takes us along Elliott Bay toward Boeing Field. The field has 2 main runways, one for left and one for right, both north-south. We want one for left because it's longer, 10,000 feet, plenty for a 737. The approach path keeps us over water, minimizing terrain concerns. As she speaks, Mitchell follows her instructions, and the city resolves into the distinctive Seattle skyline with the Space Needle prominently visible. Everything she predicted appears exactly as described. Torres monitors their descent using the mechanical pressure altimeter. 5,000 feet, he calls out. Maya continues. You should see the industrial area of Georgetown ahead, and just beyond that, Boeing Field. Look for the long parallel runways. The field sits right next to the Duwamish River. Mitchell sees it, the unmistakable layout of an airport. Relief washes through him, but he knows the hardest part lies ahead. Maya senses his concern. Captain, you've been flying this aircraft manually for 15 minutes. You already know how she feels without instruments. Trust your experience. Normal approach speed for a 737 is approximately 140 knots. You can estimate airspeed by engine sound and control pressure. Normal descent rate for final is 700 feet per minute, you can judge that by how fast the runway rises in the windscreen. You have 10,000 feet of runway, so even if you land fast or long, you have room to stop. Mitchell looks at this teenager who speaks with the assurance of an experienced instructor. In the cabin, passengers have noticed the girl walking forward and disappearing into the cockpit. Did you see that girl go in there? Someone asks. What's she doing? The businessman from 14E says loudly, that's the kid who was sitting next to me. She didn't say a word the whole flight. Now she's in the cockpit. This is insane. Flight attendants move through the cabin, preparing for emergency landing they can't explain. Some passengers begin making phone calls, realizing they've descended low enough for cell service. I don't know what's happening. The plane is descending. There's been no announcement. I love you. Mitchell begins his approach to Boeing Field, descending through 3,000 feet, lining up with runway 14 left. Without instruments, he's flying a visual approach, something he's done thousands of times in small aircraft but rarely in a commercial jet. He judges his height by the appearance of objects below, estimates speed by how quickly those objects pass beneath, and controls descent by the pressure on the yoke. Torres calls out what little the working instruments provide, pressure altitude 2,000 feet. Heading 285, looks good, Captain. Maya watches from the jump seat, her hands gripping the armrests, silently running through the landing checklist, knowing she can't help with this part. The runway grows larger in the windscreen, and Mitchell makes small corrections. At 500 feet, he realizes they're slightly fast and high, but he has 10,000 feet of runway, there's room for imperfection. At 200 feet, the threshold passes under the nose. At 100 feet, he begins the flare, pulling back gently. The main wheels touch firmly, not smooth but safe, and Mitchell immediately deploys speed brakes and applies maximum braking. The aircraft slows steadily. They roll past the midpoint, still decelerating, and finally stop with 3,000 feet remaining. For a moment, the cockpit is silent except for both pilots exhaling breaths they didn't know they were holding. Torres looks at Mitchell. Mitchell looks at Maya. "You just talked us through an emergency landing," Mitchell says, his voice filled with disbelief and gratitude. "A 15-year-old girl just saved this aircraft." Maya's composure finally cracks slightly, and tears form in her eyes. "My father would have known what to do. I just remembered what he taught me." Mitchell unbuckles and turns to face her. "Your father taught you well. You saved everyone on this aircraft. Do you understand that? You saved 147 lives today." Emergency vehicles surround Flight 447 within minutes, responding to the sight of a commercial airliner landing without radio communication. The cockpit door opens, and Jessica appears, tears on her face. "Captain, everyone's okay. What happened? How did we land?" Mitchell gestures to Maya. "She happened. This young woman guided us here using visual navigation and talked us through an emergency approach. Captain Robert Mitchell, First Officer David Torres, and this is our navigator and possibly the most knowledgeable 15-year-old pilot I've ever met." The evacuation proceeds orderly. Passengers exit via mobile stairs, confused but unharmed, stepping onto the runway with overwhelming relief. As Maya emerges, still wearing her gray hoodie, passengers begin piecing together what happened. The businessman from 14E sees her and stops. You were sitting next to me. You're just a kid. What were you doing in the cockpit?" Captain Mitchell appears behind her. "This young woman provided crucial navigation assistance that helped us land safely when we lost all electrical power. She has extensive aviation knowledge, and her help was invaluable." Over the following hours, as NTSB investigators arrive and examine the aircraft, the story emerges. The electrical failure was caused by an unprecedented cascade, a manufacturing defect in a generator, a separate wiring issue in the backup system, and a parasitic draw in the emergency batteries that maintenance had missed. The failure was so complete and rare that Boeing will later redesign redundancy protocols. But today, it created a crisis that seemed insurmountable until a quiet teenager broke her silence. Maya sits in an airport conference room, her mother beside her, while investigators ask gentle questions. She explains her background calmly, her father's teaching, her years of self-directed study, the navigation techniques she used. One investigator, Morrison, asks, "Why didn't you tell anyone about your knowledge when you boarded? Why stay silent until the emergency was critical?" Maya touches the pilot wing's pin. "Because nobody would have believed me. I'm 15. I'm a girl. I look like just another teenager on their phone. If I'd walked up to the captain during boarding and said I knew how to fly, he would have smiled and sent me back to my seat." Adults don't listen to teenagers about important things, not unless the situation becomes so desperate they have no other choice. Her words hang uncomfortably true. Morrison nods slowly. "You're probably right. But today, when it mattered most, you spoke up. You didn't let your age or others' assumptions stop you. That takes courage, maybe more courage than the flying itself." Maya's mother speaks. "After her father died, I watched her retreat into aviation. I thought it was unhealthy. Her counselor worried she was isolating herself. But I see now she was processing grief by mastering the thing that took her father from her. She was making sure she would never be helpless in an aircraft again. I'm so proud of her I can barely breathe." News of Flight 447 spreads rapidly. By evening, Maya's story has been picked up nationally, and by morning, she's being called the teenage hero who saved 147 lives. Captain Mitchell gives interviews praising her expertise, noting that without her intervention, the flight might have ended very differently. Aviation experts explain how rare her old-school navigation skills are. The FAA announces they'll study whether changes to pilot training are needed. But Maya withdraws from the spotlight, uncomfortable with attention, unsure how to process sudden visibility after years of purposeful silence. She returns to school, where classmates who never paid attention suddenly want to talk to her. Teachers who gave her concerned looks about her isolation now see her differently, not as troubled but as someone with depth they never suspected. The experience changes her, not by making her talkative but by helping her understand that her silence was a choice born of grief, and that she can choose to speak when it matters. Weeks later, Captain Mitchell visits Maya at her home, bringing a gift, pilot wings identical to her father's, with a handwritten letter. "I wanted you to have these. You earned them more thoroughly than many pilots who wear them. Your father would be incredibly proud." Maya accepts the wings with tears streaming down her face. Mitchell continues, "I've been flying for 28 years, and I thought I knew everything about handling emergencies. But you taught me something crucial: expertise doesn't always come in the packages we expect. Age doesn't determine capability. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one with the most important things to say. Thank you for saving my life and the lives of my passengers." In the following months, Maya begins visiting aviation schools and youth programs, speaking about flight and safety and pursuing knowledge even when others don't understand. She's still quiet, still introverted, but she's learned to channel her voice when needed. She talks about her father, about the crash that took him, about transforming grief into expertise. She tells aspiring young pilots, "I spent years being silent because I thought nobody would listen. But when Flight 447 lost power, I realized my knowledge mattered more than my fear of being dismissed. Your knowledge matters too. Don't hide it because you think people won't take you seriously. The world needs your voice." The FAA awards Maya a special commendation, and Boeing invites her to tour their facility. She accepts both honors quietly, understanding her story has become larger than herself, a reminder that young people possess capabilities adults overlook, that expertise emerges from unexpected places, and that in crisis, prejudices about age must give way to truth. Knowledge is knowledge, regardless of who possesses it. On the first anniversary of Flight 447's emergency landing, the passengers organize a reunion at Boeing Field, gathering at the very runway where Maya guided the aircraft to safety. Many bring their families, wanting to introduce children and spouses to the teenager they now call their guardian angel. The businessman from seat 14E, whose name Maya learned was Robert Davidson, finds her in the crowd and approaches with genuine humility. "I sat next to you for 45 minutes and never saw you," he admits, his voice thick with emotion. "I made assumptions about you based on your age and your silence. I dismissed you as just another moody teenager who didn't want to be bothered. I'm sorry for that, and I'm grateful you didn't let my assumptions, or anyone else's, stop you from speaking up when it mattered. You taught me to look deeper, to recognize that I don't always know what I'm looking at." Captain Mitchell approaches the microphone set up for the occasion and addresses the assembled crowd of survivors and their loved ones. "A year ago today, my aircraft experienced a total electrical failure that should have been impossible according to every engineering principle we understand. Every system we rely on, navigation, communication, instrumentation, simply ceased to function. First Officer Torres and I found ourselves flying blind, trying to navigate using techniques we'd barely practiced since flight school decades ago. We were scared, uncertain, and rapidly running out of options." He pauses, his eyes finding Maya in the crowd. And then a 15-year-old girl who hadn't spoken a single word during the entire flight stood up, walked to the cockpit, and demonstrated more knowledge about visual navigation and emergency procedures than pilots with decades of experience. She didn't ask permission. She didn't wait to be invited. She didn't let anyone's assumptions about her age or capabilities stop her from doing what needed to be done. In doing so, she saved 147 lives and reminded all of us why we fell in love with aviation in the first place, because flying, at its core, isn't about the sophisticated technology or the advanced systems. It's about skill, knowledge, courage, and the willingness to act when everything is on the line. The crowd erupts in applause, and Maya feels her mother's hand squeeze her shoulder supportively. Her mother, who has been her silent anchor through everything, through the devastating grief after her father's death, through the obsessive studying that worried relatives and counselors, through the overwhelming media attention that followed Flight 447, and through Maya's gradual, careful emergence from her protective shell of silence. "Your father is watching from somewhere," her mother whispers, her voice breaking slightly. "He always knew you had this strength in you, this capability. He just didn't live long enough to see it fully emerge and save so many lives. But I know he's proud. I know he's smiling." A woman named Patricia approaches Maya, tears streaming down her face, holding the hand of a 7-year-old girl with bright eyes and pigtails. "This is my daughter, Emma," Patricia says, her voice trembling. "You saved her life that day. She's in 2nd grade now, learning to read, making friends, experiencing all the beautiful ordinary moments of childhood, and she gets to experience all of that because you knew what to do when our pilots couldn't navigate. I think about that every single day. I think about how close we came to losing everything, to her never having these years, and how you stopped it from happening." Emma steps forward shyly and hands Maya a handmade card decorated with crayon drawings of an airplane and a girl with dark hair. "Thank you for helping the plane land safely," the card reads in careful, uneven letters. "You are my hero." Maya accepts it with trembling hands, adding it to the growing collection of similar cards and letters she's received over the past year, each one a reminder that her actions had consequences far beyond those 3 terrifying hours in the sky. David Torres, the first officer, joins the gathering around Maya. He's been back to flying regularly since the incident, maintaining his career, but he admits openly that the experience fundamentally changed how he approaches aviation. "I grew up in the modern era of glass cockpits and GPS navigation," he tells the assembled group. "I could program a flight management computer in my sleep, could navigate using sophisticated electronic systems without even thinking about it. But put a paper chart in front of me and ask me to navigate using only visual landmarks and dead reckoning? I'd forgotten more than I realized, let those skills atrophy because I never thought I'd need them. After Flight 447, I started taking lessons in a vintage Piper Cub with no electronic equipment whatsoever, relearning how to fly the way pilots did 50 years ago. It's been humbling, and it's made me a significantly better pilot." Maya taught all of us that the old skills still matter, that we can't rely entirely on technology because technology can and does fail. She reminded us that being a true pilot means being able to fly under any circumstances, with or without the sophisticated systems we've come to depend on. As the anniversary gathering continues into the evening, Maya finds herself standing at the edge of the runway, looking down its 10,000-foot length toward the spot where Flight 447 finally rolled to a stop exactly 1 year ago. She tries to recapture exactly how she felt in those critical moments, the overwhelming terror mixed with fierce concentration, the crushing weight of 147 lives resting on whether she could accurately remember everything her father had taught her, the surreal, almost dreamlike experience of sitting in a commercial jet cockpit giving navigation instructions to pilots who had decades more experience than she possessed. The memories remain sharp and vivid, yet they feel somehow distant, as though they happened to a different version of herself, someone who existed before she fully understood her own capabilities and before she learned that her voice could matter. Her phone buzzes with a text message from Marcus, her flight instructor and one of her father's former Air Force colleagues who has been formally teaching Maya since Flight 447 made her name known throughout aviation circles. "Congrats on making it to the 1-year anniversary. You still planning to solo next month when you turn 16? Maya smiles and types back quickly, "Absolutely. I've been flying from the right seat long enough. Time to be pilot in command officially." Marcus had offered to expedite her training given her demonstrated knowledge and her proven ability under pressure, but Maya had insisted on doing everything by the book, completing full ground school, logging every required hour of flight training, meeting every standard for proper certification. "My father always said that expertise without proper credentials is just unrealized potential," she had explained to Marcus during one of their early lessons. "I want both the knowledge and the official recognition that I've met every standard required of pilots." The NTSB investigation into Flight 447's electrical failure eventually concluded that the cascade of malfunctions resulted from three separate, completely unrelated component failures occurring simultaneously, a statistical improbability so extreme that Boeing initially questioned whether sabotage might have been involved. No evidence of sabotage was ever found, just extraordinarily bad luck combined with subtle maintenance oversights that allowed the backup systems to be compromised without anyone realizing the danger. The findings led to comprehensive new FAA directives requiring more thorough electrical system testing during routine maintenance and prompted Boeing to completely redesign certain redundancy features in their electrical architecture for future aircraft. In a strange way, Maya reflects as she stands on the runway, her father's death in a mechanical failure and her own role in surviving another catastrophic mechanical failure have together contributed to making aviation measurably safer for everyone who flies. The thought provides some measure of peace, though it doesn't erase the grief that still surfaces unexpectedly when she sees a Cessna like the one her father died in or when she hears certain songs he used to play during their weekend flights together. School has gradually become less awkward for Maya as the initial wave of celebrity attention faded and her classmates grew accustomed to her presence again, accepting her as someone remarkable but still fundamentally herself. She remains quiet, still introverted, still prefers spending lunch periods in the library reading rather than socializing in the crowded, noisy cafeteria, but now her peers understand that her silence represents a choice rather than a social deficiency or psychological problem. Some students have even begun approaching her for help with challenging math and physics problems, recognizing that someone who can navigate aircraft using mathematical calculations and applied physics probably has a strong grasp of theoretical concepts. She helps them patiently, finding unexpected satisfaction in sharing knowledge the way her father once shared knowledge with her during their countless hours together in the cockpit. Maya's future in aviation continues to take shape in exciting and unexpected ways. She's received scholarship offers from several prestigious university aviation programs and has been sent personal letters from commercial pilots around the world sharing their own experiences with emergency situations and praising her quick thinking and extensive knowledge. She's also been contacted by aviation curriculum developers who want to create comprehensive training modules based on her experience, teaching both young aspiring pilots and veteran commercial aviators about the critical importance of maintaining proficiency in non-electronic navigation skills that many modern pilots have allowed to deteriorate. She's agreed to participate in several of these educational projects, seeing them as meaningful ways to honor her father's legacy while potentially preventing future tragedies. If Flight 447 teaches aviation just one crucial lesson, she told an interviewer recently, it's that we absolutely cannot assume technology will always function when we need it. The most sophisticated aircraft in the world is still ultimately just a machine, and machines fail in ways we can't always predict or prevent. Pilots need to be able to fly confidently without their electronics, just like drivers need to be able to navigate without GPS assistance. It's not about rejecting or dismissing technology, it's about not becoming completely helpless when technology inevitably abandons you at the worst possible moment. As the sun sets over Boeing Field on this anniversary evening, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Maya stands alone on the runway for a few final reflective moments before joining her mother for the drive home. She takes out her father's original pilot wings, the ones she carried on Flight 447 and has kept with her every day since, and holds them up to catch the fading golden light. "I did it, Dad," she whispers to the evening air, her voice barely audible. "I used everything you taught me during all those weekends we spent flying together. I didn't freeze when the emergency happened. I didn't panic when everyone was counting on me. I spoke up when it mattered most, and I helped save everyone on board. I really hope I made you proud." The wind picks up slightly, carrying the distinctive smells of jet fuel and hot asphalt, the characteristic sense of airports everywhere that always make her think of her father. Maya closes her eyes and lets herself remember his voice clearly. Aviation doesn't care about your age or your size or how loud your voice is, Maya. It cares about knowledge, skill, and the courage to act decisively. If you have those three things, you can handle anything the sky throws at you. She opens her eyes and pins the wings carefully to her jacket collar, where they catch the last rays of sunset and gleam with quiet authority. Tomorrow she'll return to being a 16-year-old high school junior, attending classes and completing homework and navigating all the typical challenges of adolescence. But today, standing on the runway where she helped guide a crippled aircraft to safety exactly 1 year ago, she allows herself to simply be what she truly is, a skilled aviator, a knowledgeable emergency responder, and a young woman who found her voice at the exact moment when continued silence would have been fatal for everyone aboard. The quiet girl who sat silently in seat 14F has become someone fundamentally different, not louder, not more socially outgoing, but infinitely more aware of her own capabilities and more willing to use them decisively when circumstances demand immediate action. As Maya walks back toward the terminal building where her mother waits patiently, she thinks about the path ahead. In just a few weeks she'll solo for the first time, officially becoming a licensed pilot and earning the right to fly alone. In a few years she'll graduate high school and begin university, most likely studying aerospace engineering or professional aviation management. In a decade or two, if everything goes according to her carefully planned vision, she'll be sitting in a commercial jet cockpit as pilot in command, responsible for aircraft and passengers, carrying her father's precious legacy forward into skies he'll never see but whose safety he helped ensure through the daughter he trained so thoroughly and inspired so deeply. The path from silent teenager to professional aviator will undoubtedly be long and challenging, filled with certifications to earn and skepticism to overcome and personal tragedies to continue processing. But Maya knows with absolute certainty that she's ready for whatever comes. Flight 447 proved that beyond any doubt. It proved she could perform under unimaginable pressure, could think clearly when others panicked, could lead when leadership was desperately needed, and could save lives when every second counted. The reunion has ended, the passengers and their families have dispersed into the evening, and Boeing Field returns to its normal operations. But for Maya Chen and the 147 people whose lives intersected dramatically in the Sky One catastrophic afternoon, the memory of Flight 447 will remain forever vivid, a powerful reminder that expertise can emerge from the most unexpected sources, that silence can conceal extraordinary depth and capability, and that sometimes the quietest voice in the room is precisely the one everyone most desperately needs to hear. The plane went silent in the sky, and a silent girl found her voice to bring it home safely. In that crucial convergence of crisis and capability, she discovered not just her ability to save lives but her responsibility to use her hard-won gifts, however unexpected they might seem to others, whenever they're needed most.